All right, we're back. Great fire. By the way, can I just say, I don't know when the finger guns have become part of the intro, but I at one point started doing the finger guns every time we do the intro, and it's just become a thing. I'm pretty sure it's been like maybe episode 50 or something. Like it's been a long time, and I've just always do the finger guns, and I don't know why. But we're back. Finger guns. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 92. This week it's still the overtime gang here. Maverick is still. Remember, guys, a couple weeks ago when my PC was taking a shit? Well, now Maverick's PC is fucking dead, and he's in the middle of moving or some shit. So he's not here. What was that? So that's supposed to say.
Speaking of dead,
Okay.
speaking of dead, that Taylor Lautner guy had like over 11 substances found in his body.
Taylor Hawkins?
Is that his name?
Yeah, Taylor Lautner is Jacob from
Twilight.
No.
Dude, Jacob, no.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it was 10 substances or something. Like which of the normal, it was like THC and stuff, and then it was like opioids, and you're like, oh well. Yeah. That
R.I.P. Bud. I know you're
right.
a big fan of him. So,
I do. Yeah.
Let's say, all right, be respectful.
Yeah, we're probably, me and you were probably gonna cover that movie whenever it starts streaming. I think it's just in theaters right now. But the Studio 666 or whatever, the horror movie they just put out.
Venue 666 or whatever. But yeah, we'll most definitely watch it.
Yeah.
Because we're from very different
whenever we get there, because I really like the Foo Fighters and Tyler does not. And so, but anyway, yeah, shout out.
Fashion the man. More bad news.
Yeah, Dave Grohl. Been a lot of bad news in Dave Grohl. Anyways, this week we're watching what we were originally supposed to watch last week, but I postponed it, hoping the Maverick could be back, but he's not. So I said, "Fuck it, we're gonna watch it anyway," which is Cape Fear from 1991. Which I believe, I always forget it is, but I believe it's the first Martin Scorsese. No, I'm sorry. We watched Shutter Island. So this is the second Martin Scorsese movie that we've covered on the podcast. Also, I will say that when I picked it, watching it, this is the second time watching it through, it was a lot less horror-y than I remember. Like, I remember when I first watched it, I was like, this is a bona fide, like, this classifies as a horror movie. Which it's still, at parts, you could make the argument for that. But it definitely was a lot less horror-y vibes than I remember it. But, compared to some of the other stuff I've watched, Gremlins, I can't think of another one off the top of my head. But, Beetlejuice. That was both Maverick's picks, I think. But it's still got those horror vibes. I'm gonna rock a 7, Tyler, for Cape Fear. I'm gonna rock a 7. I went down from what I remember. I went into this thinking it was an 8. Lost a whole point for me upon the second watch, Tyler. What are you gonna give this one? You've seen this? I would take it. Yeah. So this is your third, fourth time watching it, probably.
The movie as a whole, I'm going to give a 5.
Okay.
But there's one person in this film that really fucking shines, and is a 10. Yeah. 10 out of 10. But I think the ladies let this movie down a lot. But, this is my opinion.
Well, I only feel that way about one lady.
But
all right.
It is a good movie. Like I suggest everyone watch it. Just so you've seen it,
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, spoiler warning for Cape Fear from 91. We're gonna ruin everything about it. So you've been warned. First off, obviously, this is a remake of a movie from '62, I believe, of the same name, Cape Fear. Have you ever seen the original movie, Tyler?
There's an original?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought this was the original.
No. The original, the Nick Nolte's character is played by Gregory Peck of To Kill a Mockingbird fame.
Oh, Gregory Peck's in the movie. But
He is in the movie. Yeah, that was his little cameo. And then
I was wondering why he was in it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then Max Cady, or whatever his fucking last name is pronounced, is also in this movie. But he's played by Robert Mitchum, who in this movie was like... He was one of the lawyers or the cops the guy was talking to. I think he might have been the one who was like, you should get a gun, or something. And Nick Nolte's like, you telling me that I should, kill this man or something? He's like, no, I'm a man of the law. I would never say that. I'm pretty sure that's who,
I'm pretty sure you're right.
it was Max Cady. But so, yeah, the original, I've never seen it. I would like to watch it. I wonder how similar it is to this. I can't imagine it's like as batshit crazy as Robert De Niro gets with it at some points, By the way, can we talk? Is that who your 10 out of 10 was for Robert De Niro? Yeah, absolutely. This is probably, in my opinion, maybe Robert De Niro's best acting role.
Meet the Fockers, what?
Yeah, Meet the Fockers. That's number 2. That's number 2. But yeah, he goes for it, and he's fucking.
He leaves nothing behind. Yeah,
he's wild. So it's also weird seeing Nick Nolte when he's not just like a 70-year-old alcoholic, drunk-looking dude. Like
you're like, I'm supposed to buy this guy's a lawyer. How dare they? I'm like,
yeah,
he does all right.
Yeah, it's weird seeing him being normal to the point that I forgot upon watching this that Nick Nolte was the dad. I remember going in and being like, oh yeah, the dad's kind of a nobody, and I was like, oh fuck, it's Nick Nolte. It's like, yeah, Nick Nolte's in it. The daughter is played by, Juliette Lewis is her name, right?
Yep.
Of Natural Born Killers fame, which I've never watched. I keep meaning to, but it never streams anywhere. So
I'll punch you in the face. It's such a good movie.
I've never watched it.
Like, you know how I'm very... What's it called? I don't want to say controversial, but like I don't go with the flow.
Yeah.
If everyone's like, I love the new Spider-Man, I'm like,
yeah.
Because I don't let shit like influence me like that.
Uh-huh.
Natural Born Killers is like the one thing that I actually agree with people that it's that good. I mean, I watched it 2 weeks ago, and I was like, oh man, this is kind of lame.
Yeah.
But it might just be because, like, I've seen it, and it's a lucky 1-year-old movie, but it's really fucking good.
Yeah. But Juliette Lewis, fun fact, Tyler, she was married for like 5 years to professional skateboarder Steve Barra. If you've ever, co-creator of The Barracks.
Also, fun fact, she was 17 filming this movie.
Yeah.
So,
shout out. She's playing a 15-year-old. So, I guess that's not.
Yeah, not too. Well, she was like a month away from being 16, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then who's the mom played by? She's the one I least knew.
Jennifer Grange or something like that. I don't know. I have to look.
I don't know. Like I said, she probably gets the least to do in this movie, but I thought she was all right. I did not like Juliette Lewis in this movie, which, to be fair, I mean, her character, I don't think you're supposed... She's like the coming of age teenage daughter who, like, doesn't want to listen to the parents, and, she's been kind of, what's the word? Sheltered her whole life. So, she hasn't had these experiences to kind of help you grow and shit. And throughout the movie, Robert De Niro tries to play upon all that to manipulate her. But yeah, I didn't care for her very much in this movie.
Her name was
Danny.
Jessica Lange.
Oh, shout out Jessica Lange. All right, well, hey, the movie starts off with an intro where it's just blasting the theme music that will run throughout this movie, which is amazing. which is like the bow, bow, bow. Like, it's just this crazy.
That was very over the top for this movie.
I thought it fit great. When we see Deniro in a little bit doing the push-ups or whatever. And the back tattoo, and it's just as loud, like it's pretty wild, but I enjoyed it. But it's playing this music, and as it's playing it, we're getting the opening credits while it's through water, and it's just this weird intro where you see like an eagle flying at one point. There's like an eyeball, and it's just like. The intro of this doesn't seem... Also, can I tell you what one of my problems is with this movie? This movie has no reason being called Cape Fear. Like, don't get me wrong, Cape Fear is a badass sounding name, alright? But at the same time, like, the big climax of the movie, I get, takes place on Cape Fear. But Cape Fear doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, you know? Like, there's no, like... connection to Cape Fear. They just go there at the end, and that's where like the climax of the movie is.
I think you're missing the whole theme of this movie is fear of what it'll do, fear of what's
capes.
going on. You were a little too happy. And you were like pausing with the water, and I was like, oh,
that was pretty good, Thomas.
Fancy glass you got there. Where'd you get that from?
The glass store.
Where's the plastic jug?
It's empty.
People like, I got the wrong channel.
Yeah, the wrong channel. But anyway, I just thought when I was watching the movie that I just thought of that. I was like, there's no reason for this to be called Cape Fear. Like, I don't know, it just seemed weird. So the movie opens up in reality, it opens up with Juliette Lewis, like, standing in a classroom or something, and she's like, Cape Fear. I never understood why they called it fear, because out there on the waters, there was nothing to fear except for the sun going down too soon or some shit. And that happens, okay? And then skipping all the way to the end, she never narrates again throughout the whole movie. And then at the very end of the movie, she's like, we never talked about him again. I guess that's just, how we could get by him. I don't live in the past, though. I want to live. The end. And I was like she's narrating like she was the main character of this movie. When I was like, you were not. Like, it's like, what? The narration, the beginning and the end narration, I hated. I hated that ending narration. Like, yeah, I don't like it. But the movie really starts when we see Robert De Niro in jail. He's doing... I keep calling them push-ups, but it has another name. What is it, Tyler?
Pull-ups?
Yeah, but is it really... Because he's using the triceps, you know what I mean?
He's doing dips.
Ah, yeah. So he's doing that. He's shirtless, and he's fucking ripped. And on his wall, he has, like, pictures of Stalin. And he has all these law books and all this shit. And he's got this giant back tattoo of a cross. And it's like the scales of justice, where it's good and evil and everything on either side and shit. And the guards come and get him, and he's getting out of jail today. We'll learn in a little bit that he's been serving 14 years in jail. So he's leaving. As he's leaving, by the way, like, dude must have a reputation in jail, because, like, everyone is standing at their cells, like, staring at him as he's leaving. Like, oh shit, there goes Max Cady, you know? Also, fun fact, Tyler, when the movie ended, before I turned it off and the credits were rolling, apparently one of these prisoners is played by Edgar Allan Poe IV.
Yep.
So, shout out to Edgar Allan Poe IV. You know, that I just thought that was cool when I saw that. I looked him up to see if he was in anything else. He was, but it was all like a little like that again. Like every movie, he was like guy buying a magazine, guy, doing this. So he was never had like a role. But shout out to him. He gets released from jail. There's a line here where the cops are like, "What about your books?" And he's like, "I already read them." He has a super southern accent in this movie.
Yeah, you don't need them. I already read them.
Yeah, yeah. My favorite one that we'll get to, he smokes a cigar throughout this whole movie. And at one point, he's like, "You see, my only vice is this here cigar." That's my favorite little use of his accent. So he gets out of jail. We go over and we get a brief scene inside the home of Nick Nolte, who will be the main character of this movie. With Nick Nolte, his wife, Jennifer Lange or whatever the fuck.
Jessica Lange.
Okay.
Jessica Lange.
Yeah, and then Juliette Lewis is his 15-year-old daughter. And on the surface, this first time, they seem like a normal, put together, happy family. They
a little nuts, but yeah.
Yeah.
She's an artist or whatever, right? So
yeah. They end up going to a movie. And we find this out because Robert De Niro ends up going to the same movie. And we get a scene of him sitting down in the movie theater and lighting up, a big old cigar and just puffing away. And I remember being like, "Oh man, are they going to kick him out because he's smoking?" And I remembered, oh yeah, this is 1991. This was just, this was like acceptable back then.
It wasn't. You could smoke it.
Could you not? I thought you could smoke like cigarettes and shit.
Nope.
Oh, all right. Well,
like some hospitals and stuff had like a smoking room, but I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't that old back then, so
Yeah. All right. But anyway, he starts smoking, and he just starts to like laugh maniacally at every little joke in this movie. Which
was Problem Child, wasn't it?
Oh.
Yeah, it's that movie with the kid who's like beats up on him and stuff. Junior.
Oh.
And with Gary Ritter or whatever. It's a great movie, but
I don't know.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, and I mean everyone's laughing, but I mean he's like like he's doing one of these types of laugh. And Nick Nolte and his family are sitting right behind him. Nick Nolte tries to like tap him on the shoulder and be like, hey, but De Niro doesn't pay attention to him. So Nick Nolte is like, all right, well, let's just move. Say move. The movie ends up wrapping up. They're now out in the lobby. The daughter is telling Nick Nolte, she's like, you should have kicked that guy, You should just beat him up. And he's like, oh, I'll beat you up. And, father-daughter type of shit. And so then he goes up. And I guess the weird thing is he went to the movies, but now he's paying for the movies after they've already been in.
No, that's ice cream parlor after the movie.
Oh, okay. That makes sense because when I was reading shit about this movie, they were talking about the ice cream parlor scene, and I was like, I don't remember them being in a fucking ice cream parlor. What are they talking about? But there we go. All right, so they're in the ice cream. So Nick Nolte is like, all right, how much do I owe you? And the lady's like, oh, it's taken care of already. And she's like, what? Or he's like, what? And so then she's like, oh yeah, So he looks, and De Niro is now sitting out in his car, still smoking the cigar and just staring directly at Nick Nolte. And they like make eye contact for a while. And he's like, what the fuck? And so then he like walks over to his family and he looks back and a truck is driving by. And when the truck goes by, Robert De Niro is gone. So he's like, all right, well, obviously at that point, I don't think he recognizes who that is. But I think he still recognizes that's the guy from the movie theater. And so he's like, well, that's fucking weird, Next up, we go to Nick Nolte, who's playing. What is this game called? I call it in my notes. I call it Wall Ball.
It's Racquetball.
Okay, yeah. Which always, every time I see it, scares me. Like it just looks so dangerous every time I see this game. Which I don't know what the ball feels like. Like it could if it hits you. It's just nice.
It's hard rubber. No, it's
yeah.
It's really fun. I think you would have a blast.
I imagine, but it looks so dangerous. Like it's just uh, but yeah, he's playing.
Not to go off on a tangent about racquetball,
Mm-hmm.
but you hit the ball, and then the other person has to hit it before it makes two bounces, just like tennis.
Oh.
But you can play it off of all four walls.
Hmm.
So if you're going to hit it and you're like up close, I can do a reverse swing and knock it off the back wall. So it's like 3D tennis, kind of. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You'd really like it. I don't know where there's any courts, but
I don't know. Um, we build our own. We build a racquetball court. But yeah, they're playing racquetball. This girl, I don't know her name, but I recognize her from stuff. She was in Goodfellas, but I don't think that's what I recognized her from. I recognize her from something else. But he's here with her, and immediately you can kind of tell that like they have, mostly because the first conversation they have, Nick Nolte's like, "We gotta stop getting together," or something. You're like, "Oh, and at the time they make it sound like they haven't done anything yet. But as the movie goes on, I'm pretty sure that Nick Nolte was banging this chick. Like, it seems
he did nothing. Nothing happened between them.
Did nothing happen?
Yeah, and nothing. Not yet.
Not yet. That's what she says. But then I swear that later we'll get to it. But there's a scene where this girl is talking to Deniro in the bar. I swear she says that she fucked this guy.
No, says she only messes with married men. This is the first time, but nothing's happened. And then later on, him and his wife are arguing, and he was like, "We haven't even done anything.
Yeah,
you just talk."
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times when people cheat, especially in this situation,
yeah,
it's not because of like lust. Because Nick Nolte's laying the pipe on his wife, right? We see that like in moments, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's like they just look for like someone to talk to or something, right? Like it's like a bro thing, not a hoe thing.
Well, that's like one of our favorite movies that no one has ever watched, Fences. Slight spoiler for Fences, so you might want to skip a minute. But there's that thing where he's sleeping around on his wife, and then she's like, "All right, so you're gonna end it, right?" And me and you both were like, "All right, this is when he's gonna be like, yeah, yeah." And he's like, "She makes me laugh," and we were like, "Oh my god!" And he like, "Yeah, the movie's so good," and no one ever watched it. Like, I don't know. You're the only person I know that watched it.
It's so good. I mean, it won an Oscar and shit, so people have seen it, but
I guess, but yeah, it seems like no one ever talks about it anymore. But anyway, yeah, so he tells her, we gotta stop hanging around. My wife doesn't know you exist, and that's for the best, and all this shit. And she's like, "We're just friends, I just like talking to you, all this shit." And so he's like, "Hey, And so eventually they do end up being like, "Oh, we'll get together like tomorrow or whatever."
Yeah, a rematch or some bullshit.
Yeah.
It was like we're still hanging out.
Yeah. So Nick Nolte goes over to his car, gets in, puts the key into the ignition, but before he can start it, someone reaches in and grabs the keys out of his car, and when he looks up, it's Deniro standing there. And Deniro is like, "You can't remember me, can you?" And Nick Nolte's like, "Yeah, I remember you. You're that guy from the theater or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, no, you know me a little longer than that. I know it's been a while." And this is when we learn, it's been 14 years he's spent in prison. There's also when he drops the line where he's like, "My only vice is this here cigar and shit." Yeah, and so he has this whole like kind of conversation about the you lose a lot of stuff in jail and all this shit. They never say it here at first, but you can kind of get the at first you probably think that like Nick Nolte must have been the lawyer who put him in jail.
Yeah.
That's what you think. But later we'll learn that it's kind of the opposite. He was the guy who was supposed to be defending him. But at the same time, he kind of is responsible for De Niro winding up in jail. So, De Niro ends up saying something about like, you learn a lot about loss or something like that. And Nick Nolte's like, oh yeah, well that loss is something or some shit, and like De Niro is giving him his keys back at this point, so he's starting up the car, and as De Niro is walking away, he mumbles something, and Nick Nolte doesn't hear him, but he can tell it's like he's like what, and he's like, what did you say? But De Niro just keeps walking away. I didn't hear it then, but apparently what he says, because then later Nick Nolte says, is apparently he said like, you're gonna learn about loss, or you're gonna know about loss or something, or I'm gonna make you know about loss or some shit is what he mumbled.
You're gonna find out about loss.
Yeah. Which if you ever hear someone say that to you, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
So Nick Nolte,
it reminds me of remember when we watched Everything Goes Back to This? What's that first one? Not Dead Space. Event Horizon.
Yeah.
When Samuel Jackson's like, we got to get out of here, and the guy, the main character, is like, we're already there.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, what if Samuel?
Yeah,
Samuel Jackson is Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah.
It was like, hey, what was that?
Yeah, what did you just say? Yeah.
Whenever people like say something and someone else is walking away, it always pops in my head. I always remember that moment.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's ruined movies for me.
Yeah. There's a part where in this movie all I could think about was Funny Games. And if you remember, like, there's the scene in Funny Games where they're like making her take off her clothes, and Maverick is like, oh, I was wishing they were going to show us her tits. And we were like, no. We were like, those aren't good titties. And like his whole reason is he said if they ended up showing titties, for some reason that means that they were going to go far with the movie. They were going to show more. And we were like, that's not how that works. We were like, you don't want to see the titties? And he's like, I'm telling you guys, I want to see the titties. And there's part in this where that's all I could think about was the no, you don't want to see these titties. So anyway, Nick Nolte goes home, and he goes home to his wife, and it's coming up on the 4th of July. I think it's like the 2nd of July, because fireworks are already getting popped off. And they say, like, we still have 2 more days till the 4th of July or something. So fireworks getting popped off. And Nick Nolte and his wife, they start banging in black and white, nonetheless. There's a lot of times in this movie where it just cuts randomly to black and white. Not really for any reason, I don't think, but more of just a aesthetic reason.
I dig it. It's like a filmography thing.
Yeah.
Right?
The only time I really like it is later when there's the scene where Nick Nolte wakes up and thinks he sees De Niro in the house standing there smoking the cigar, and it's in black and white when they show him. But every other time it kind of seemed like, all right, what's going on? Then randomly they like bang, and then randomly the lady wakes up and she goes over and sits in her mirror and like real weirdly like puts on lipstick and like taps herself, like starts tapping herself in the head. And then like I was like, what's going on here? I started thinking maybe this was a dream or something. But then she goes over to the window to look out at the fireworks, and when she does, we see De Niro just like laid on top of the wall with his cigar, just sitting there, and fireworks just busting off behind him. Which looks real. It looks like those fireworks were literally right behind him, like they were like underneath
right out the window.
Yeah. And it looks crazy. And so she's like, "What?" So she wakes up Nick Nolte, and she's like, "There's a guy out there and shit." And Nick Nolte immediately knows who she's talking about. So he goes running out, and he's like, "Hey, I want you off my property." But De Niro is already gone. So the next day, Nick Nolte goes to like his lawyer buddy or something.
I think he's the guy who owns the firm.
Okay. Yeah, and he starts telling him about this guy, and this is when he drops the thing about, he said that I'm going to learn about loss or whatever. He says that the guy was in for battery, That's what he got put in prison for. But, you know, it was 14 years ago. Nick Nolte is like, I can't remember all the details of it. But this is when he drops that he was his defense lawyer. So it adds another, like, oh, well, why is Deniro after his defense lawyer, you know? After that, also, I think it was that same scene that he's like, oh, I'm going to get a restraining order or something. Like, that was what ended up coming to that.
Yeah, he said that he put in for it and it was going to take 10 days or something.
Yeah, yeah. So back home, the mom is like, we should get a gun. And Nick Nolte is like, oh, would it make you feel safer with a gun in the house? And I was kind of like, yeah. Like, what do you mean? But for some reason, he's like real against it. He's like, no guns or whatever. And that's basically.
They don't believe in them or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, they are very real. You'll find out later.
Yeah. So he goes and talks to. There's a couple different people that kind of all look the same because they're all wearing like lawyer outfits, which just like suits and shit. But he goes and talks to this other lawyer who's different. And he tells him that the case the guy had was rape and battery and shit. And apparently, he had received evidence that the girl was promiscuous. But he buried the report. And he tries to justify it by saying, you know, you should have seen what he did to this girl and all that shit. But his lawyer buddy is like, no, you buried the report. He's like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like, he's not hearing it. He's like, I can't believe you would do something like that. So that's the whole, and he's like, but there's no way he could know about that, right? So that adds in the whole, like, oh, okay, well, Nick Nolte could have saved Deniro from going to jail, but instead he buried the report about this lady. And, you know, which also, I gotta say, okay, obviously this movie is a remake of a movie from the 60s. And so I don't know how much they changed, like I said, because I haven't seen the original. But their meaning of her being promiscuous is that she had 3 different partners in a month.
Yep.
And I was like, so I guess that's, you know, I guess that's the evidence that, well, clearly he couldn't have raped this girl because she was with 3. It just seemed like a weird, like, that was the key piece of evidence that was going to keep him from going to jail. I
realize this is 30 years ago.
Yeah, but even like 91, I mean, we've been through the 70s at that point when everyone was just about banging and stuff, you know? Like,
I mean, kind of true, but not really.
Yeah.
One fringe group of like hippies and stuff. But, you know, it's cool. But I understand what you're saying. It's like 3 partners. I mean, in this film alone, Nick Nolte had the girl he cheated with in Atlanta, his wife, and this new girl that he was cheating with.
Uh-huh.
So it's like...
Yeah.
A lot of promiscuous things going on.
Yeah. I don't know. It was something, but that's the... Also, real quick, off subject, you know, Jonestown, obviously, Jim Jones, the Kool-Aid and stuff. I guess because you're so used to it, every time I hear that, I always am like, oh yeah, you know, that was pretty crazy, like 60, 70 people or something. I was watching something the other day, it had 919 people, and you forget just how many people, like, fucking, not to mention, you know, the people, they had the whole thing with, like, the infiltrators who then, like, tried to get away on the plane, and Jim Jones sent people to shoot them while they were, and, like, that was pretty crazy.
I don't know why you went to that, but okay.
I think because we mentioned the hippies, and for some reason that reminded me, even though the Jonestown wasn't a lot of hippies, I don't think. It was just a weird cult.
They were ultra, like, religious people.
Yeah. But anyway, shout out to Jonestown.
Shout out to our sponsor, Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid, yeah.
And cherry and blue raspberry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's good. I could go for some Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid. Yeah, I was like, Kool-Aid.
So anyway, that adds into like, okay, well maybe that's why Deniro is following this guy around. Nick Nolte Next scene, he's walking down the street, and Deniro pulls up next to him. And basically, he's just kind of hassling him again while he's walking down the street. And this is when Nick Nolte starts asking. He's like, why are you bothering me? Why not the judge? Or, the accuser? Or, all this other shit. And De Niro's like, well, seems like they were just doing right by their job, And he's like, why didn't I do right by my job? I'm your, I was your defendant. I tried. You could have gotten charged with rape. With some laws, that could have been life. You could be on death row by now, but you only got battery, And De Niro is like, well, I guess you could look at it that way and shit. But he's still rambling on. And so eventually Nick Nolte starts to ask, all right, well, how much money do you want? And De Niro's like, how much money do I want? And he's like, yeah, how much money do you want? And so Nick Nolte just throws out, he's like, 10 grand. And so De Niro kind of laughs, and he's like, 10 grand? He's like, all right, well, let's break this down. Let's say you offer me 50 grand. There's 14 years, 52 weeks, 365 days a year. So that's $10 a day for 50 grand. That's not even minimum wage, counselor. And he's just like, you gotta be kidding me with this shit, And so he kind of blows him off, and then his little alarm clock thing goes off, and he's like, oh, I'm late for another appointment. I gotta be back. Also in this thing, he talks about how he learned to read while he was in prison. And he says something where he's like, I started with Ronald McDonald, went to Blues, or Cat in the Hat, and then went to law books. And it was like, oh man, you really made a jump. It was...
This is my only problem with this. It's 14 years, and I know, a lot of time. But I've been reading my whole life. I read for fun. I know you do too. I mean, you're a big reader.
Yeah.
This guy is reading Nietzsche and stuff. Super advanced philosophy.
Yeah.
Because I'm a nihilist, myself. I'm something of a scientist myself, Peter. Anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm a pessimist, everything like that, blah, blah, blah. I struggle with reading these books. So,
yeah.
I don't know if they're trying to say dude's a super genius and he just didn't apply himself.
According to him, he's a bona fide lawyer. Because throughout the movie, he's like, we're of the same practice, and
just two lawyers having a conversation.
Yeah, it's which I don't know if there's any real documents to back this up that he's a qualified lawyer, but
I mean, later on he starts talking, about going through his briefs and knowing stuff and everything else.
Yeah, but
but anyway.
Fuck, I was gonna say something. What were you just talking about? Oh, really? I was gonna talk about, because at one point the dude quotes the Bible all the time in this movie too, and like I said, he has a bunch of religious tattoos. Later we'll see he has a bunch of just quotes tattooed on his body. Have you ever thought about, Tyler? I don't know if you ever. I'm not a religious person, but have you ever thought about just reading the Bible, because it seems like there's some pretty good stories in there?
Yeah, I've read the Bible a couple times.
I've never read it, but at the same time, I'm like, I probably wouldn't understand half of the shit going on in there, but it seems like there's some pretty cool shit going on. It was the original Game of Thrones before fucking Game of Thrones came out, but. And then that.
It's not that good.
Yeah, it's not that good. The Bible's alright, but have you read Game of Thrones? Yeah, at least the Bible had a fucking ending. Game of Thrones.
It doesn't really. The Bible doesn't have an ending.
Yeah. Well, it has a twist. God or Jesus comes back.
That's halfway through the book.
What?
And then
how do you top?
That's kind of the problem I think King James found himself in.
They really blew the load too early. Anyway, Nick Nolte gets a call from his wife. He's back at his lawyer's office. He gets a call from his wife, and at first he's like, "Oh, tell her I'm busy or something." But then the receptionist lady's like, "Oh no, she says it's urgent." So he picks up and he's like, "Hello?" And then immediately cuts to him in the car driving and shit. And he gets back home, and there's a member of the family I haven't mentioned yet, which is their dog. I don't know the name of the fucking dog.
Baxter?
Is that it? Okay.
I think.
But apparently, they heard this it sounded like the dog was screaming, is what the wife says. And then they brought him in, and they called the vet, but then the dog was just sitting there, and it was like he just was winding down like a clock. He just kept getting a little slower and slower, and eventually he just kind of fell over, eyes wide open. The lady says he looked surprised, and then the dog died. And the vet says that the dog was poisoned. So naturally, Nick Nolte is like, this motherfucker poisoned my dog, you know? And then this is when he goes, I thought I told you, because he's kind of warned his family about, this guy, and he hasn't given them all the details, but he told them that, he went to jail for battery, and he's probably just upset that I couldn't get him out of jail time or whatever. So he's kind of told them to be a little safer about going outside and stuff. So he tells the wife, he's like, I thought I told you not to let him outside. And she's like, I didn't let him outside. And they start yelling. And then this is when, because Juliette Lewis just goes, ah! And runs out the door. And like, I don't know what I was doing there. I was like, how long can I go with that?
You okay?
Yeah. But it would just seem so dumb. Like her just like it runs out. Yeah. I don't know. But the dog got poisoned.
Yeah, the dog got.
Yeah. Anyway. So
it's really weird though, because like later on, right? I'm like, what? I don't understand a lot of stuff with the dog.
Yeah.
So they never show the dog or
No.
nothing.
Yeah.
So I never understand, like, what actually happened to the dog.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like how, because they say he was screaming, so I thought it was going to be one of the things where, like, oh, Deniro just jumped over the fence, fucking broke the dog's neck or something. But it's like, it's like, well, how did he poison it? Because it must have hurt, So he must have, I'm assuming he, like, stuck him with needles or something. But
I think he just...
But then they say he never, like, hopped the fence or anything. So it's like, did he just like toss over some poison food, or what happened there?
The really weird part is that later on, he goes, I know how he did it.
Yeah, and he never says it.
Yeah, and like you just never find out, and it's like,
yeah,
okay, thanks, guy.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so they go and they arrest Deniro, and their plan here is they can't really get him, on breaking and entering or anything like that, because he didn't, but it's a $10,000 fine for poisoning the dog, and their theory is this guy doesn't have any fucking money, so they're going to be able to fine him, and then he can't pay the fine, and so then that's jail time and shit. So they bring him in, and they start doing, they go and they search his place while they have him downtown. They have Nick Nolte behind the two-way mirror, so that Deniro can't see him, even though obviously Deniro knows he's in the next room. This is when he takes off his shirt, and you see him, and he's just jacked. And he's got all these Bible quotes on his, tattooed on him, and all this shit. But as they're doing this, they go and they look, and they find that actually... Robert De Niro has $30,000 because while he was in jail, his grandma died.
They made it seem like that was a ton of money, like a boatload of cash.
Yeah,
because this dude's like pimping it all day.
Yeah, and so at that point they don't have any other because he didn't break and enter it. He didn't assault anybody, so they have nothing else to go on here. He can pay the fine. And then right before the scene ends, we get a thing with De Niro taking off his pants, and he has pink zebra-striped Speedo underwear. And that was just a little, a little fun.
A little tidbit,
fun bit. Yeah. Oh, well, I forgot to mention that scene where De Niro pulled up next to Nolte when he's walking down the street. I forgot to mention there's a part where De Niro talks about in jail, I learned about my feminine side, and says that he was held down and molested by 4 black guys or 4 white guys, because apparently it happened multiple times. So apparently that's why he might have been wearing that pink zebra striped underwear. That's why I went back to it. So now the next scene we go to like this 4th of July parade where the float, it's like everyone, it's real people, but they're standing still like they're these famous paintings and pictures. And one is like Washington in the boat with crossing the fucking the river. Then you have the like Iwo Jima or whatever with the soldiers hanging up there holding the flag, all this stuff. As they're there, Nick Nolte looks across the street and Robert De Niro's there staring at him. And he's like, or staring at his wife. And so he's like, that son of a bitch, he's staring at you. And his wife goes, what? And so Nick Nolte just cuts through the parade, goes straight to Robert De Niro and starts like pushing him down and stuff. And everyone's looking at Nick Nolte like he's crazy. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, this son of a bitch. And Robert De Niro's like, I'm just minding my business. You're lucky I don't sue you, you know? This is when there's this...
Broke my arm.
Yeah. This is when there's a part where it cuts back and the wife is across the street and she goes, where did he go? And I was like, bitch, he's 10 feet in front of you. He just went straight. Just look across where everyone's like, you know, like... But yeah, he makes this whole big scene. And but eventually, the people around are like, "Get the fuck out of here, man!" So like Nick Nolte just has to back off. After that is when we go to Robert De Niro at a bar with the chick who Nick Nolte was playing racquetball with, and she is clearly like drunk or very tipsy at the moment. She's just giggling and laughing. And he's chatting her up. We see that De Niro is drinking Evian water. He's been drinking Evian water this whole movie. I don't know if that's the sponsor or what was going on there.
Why would they sponsor the water that
this crazy guy? Yeah, I don't know. But she's chatting him up, and they're kind of making these jokes, and this is when I talk about she's talking about about the sleeping with married men or whatever. And, she has this one guy, and he actually stood her up today and all this shit. And De Niro's like, oh, that's crazy or whatever. And so she's like, where are you from? And he goes, oh, I'm from, something state penitentiary. And she, like, laughs. And he's like, I'm not fucking playing, And so she's like, well, what are you in for? Or first she says that she has a joke. And the joke... I like this because it's like a single woman and she meets a guy, says he's from prison, and she's like, well, what were you in prison for? And he's like, well, I chopped my wife up into 52 pieces. And De Niro goes, ah! Yeah. And she says that. And I was like, that's not the punchline. Yeah. And then the lady's like, so you're telling me you're single? And De Niro's like, ha ha. He has an extra little laugh. And so she's like, well, what were you in for? And he's like, well, I chopped my wife into 52 pieces, And she's like, oh, And so eventually Nero ends up saying, like, I was at this peace rally and this one cop got a little rough with the girl behind me, and so I punched him and they gave me some time. So he's flirting with this girl, and eventually they wind up back in one of their, like, apartments or hotel room. And they're like, they're taking their clothes off and shit. De Niro flips her over onto her stomach and is pulling her hair a little bit. And she's like, oh, he likes it rough, still trying to go along with it. And De Niro eventually pulls out these handcuffs and handcuffs her behind, and she's like playing like, what did I do, officer? Playing along. And so then finally, once he has her handcuffed, he just reaches down and just yanks out a lock of her hair. And then she like screams because at this point she's like, oh my God. Then he just leans down and just bites a straight up chunk out of her cheek and rips. This is out of nowhere, people. I'm telling, like, if you see the movie, like, he's like, you can tell he's not right. But then this just comes out like he's biting people's cheeks out. You're like, what's going on? So he like spits the cheek, and then he grabs her again and pulls her head back, and then he goes, I got you now, bitch. You're not supposed to laugh.
It's so good.
But I was like, whoa, dude. And he just starts fucking laying into her. And I was like, where did this come from? Yeah, and it zooms out, and we just see, him still punching her through the curtain. And then the next day, the dude at home, Nick Nolte, gets a phone call, and he's like, "What? Hello? Oh, all right, that's good news." Which is also a very, like, kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but he says it's good news, and when he turns around, he goes, Max Cady just raped another girl. So that his good news is that Max Cady raped another girl, because now he'll be able to, it won't be his problem anymore. He can get rid of him. I just found that be a subtle little touch. It's good news, whatever.
Yeah, even though he just raped somebody.
Yeah, like someone else's life has been altered forever, and not in a good way. But he's like, oh, this is good news because now this problem is gone. As he says that, by the way, when he says he raped another girl, his wife is like, "What do you mean another? I thought he was in for battery." And he's like, "Well, yeah, and he kind of tells her that, yeah, it was rape and battery. And the wife is like, "Well, how old was the girl?" And he says 16. And then as he says that, like, Juliette Lewis steps out, and she's like, "What do you mean 16?" And steps out, and they just kind of look at her and tell her to leave, And so that's when you're first like, oh, his daughter. I assume she was 16 already, but, we learned that she's like a month away from being 16. So Nick Nolte goes to the hospital to meet this girl, and his cop or lawyer buddy is standing out there and says that she says she isn't going to testify yet. And when he opens up the door, he sees that it's the girl who he has been playing racquetball with and shit. So he goes in, tries to talk to her. She's like, I thought I was going to show you up since you didn't show, since you stood me up and all this stuff. But she's like, now look at me, and, I'm making a mistake. I always make mistakes. And Nick Nolte is basically like, listen, I don't give a shit what you're talking about. I need you to testify. And she's like, no, I'm not going to testify. And he's like, he'll be gone, But she, like, refuses to testify. So,
and she makes a good point because she works with all these people, and she'll know, like, what they're talking about her and all this bullshit. Like, I understand it,
Yeah. So out in the parking lot, this is when we get the scene I talked about earlier, where the guy who I believe is Max Cady from the original tells him that maybe you should just get a gun and kind of make Deniro or come into your house, and self-defense. At that point, he's like, "Are you telling me to set up a trap to kill Max Cady and stuff?" And he's like, "No, I'm a upstanding law. I would never say something about that." And basically, that is what he's like. Sometimes you gotta just take it in your own hands. But Nick Nolte's like, "I would never do something like that." So Nick Nolte goes and hires a private investigator to basically follow around Robert De Niro and, like, learn more about what he's been getting up to and all this shit. And so that's what he does. He, like, follows De Niro to his house. He does, like, we get a little story about De Niro and this guy in prison who were cooks, and they had trouble with each other. So then one day, like, they found the guy with his neck broken and his cheek or his tongue bit out. Not even ripped out. It was specifically bit out. But they could never find enough evidence to link it to Max Cady. So that was a little thing. Back at home, Nick Nolte calls the chick at the hospital to, like, check up on, and says that she's gonna move back to, like, Virginia or wherever her folks are from. And to Nick Nolte, once again, kind of playing into his character, this is like, oh, good, she's kind of getting out of here now because I don't have to deal with her, or my wife or whatever. But as he's talking to her, when he turns around and looks in the window, he can see the reflection of his wife that is now standing behind him in the doorway. So immediately he starts going from like, oh yeah, no, that's good, to being like, all right, well, you take care of that, and like trying to change his tone. And so he hangs up on her. He turns back around. He's like, oh yeah, that was the girl, I work with her or something like that. And so the wife is immediately like, ah, yeah? So you've been fucking her? And like, starts just piecing him up. And he's like, what? And he's like pushing her off. And she's just like hitting him and shit. They start arguing. This is when there's a part where Tyler mentioned it. the daughter goes into her room and slams the door and turns on like MTV, and it's playing Guns N' Roses Patience, but the video on the TV is Jane's Addiction been caught stealing. And so I don't know, like, if maybe throughout time they lost like the right, like, you know, when they moved it over to DVDs and stuff, if they had to switch the song or if it was just always like that. But yeah, I don't know. That was a very weird little thing.
I took it as she was listening to Jane's Addiction, but had the other one playing on the TV.
Yeah.
That's what I ended up settling on, but at
Okay.
the same time, I was like, "This is dumb."
Yeah, it was weird. So they're arguing the whole time. Patience is playing in the background. You can hear it. Eventually, Nick Nolte like calms her down. He's like, you know, he's trying to split us apart, all this bullshit. He's like, together as a team, you know, we can get rid of him and shit. And then it cuts to him on the couch, like having the sleep. And I thought that was a funny little cut. So
he's like, this is bullshit. Like he's like,
yeah,
it's really bad. Yeah, it's really good.
So then we get a scene, Tyler, that might kind of fly under the radar for a lot of people, but I think when we get to best of worst of might be my favorite part of the whole movie, which is the private investigator dude is at a diner. He's been following around Deniro, and some food shows up, and he's like, I didn't order this, and they're like, oh, that guy over there sent it, and it's Deniro. So Deniro's showing, hey, I know, you're following me around or whatever. So the private investigator dude is like, oh, shit. So he goes walking outside, and he's like, hey, Max Cady, come here. He's like, why don't you do me a favor and get the fuck out of here, you white trash piece of shit. Like, just going in on him immediately. And him and Deniro, for like 5 minutes, just go back and forth trading barbs. And Deniro's like, are you threatening me? If we're out in public, it's self-defense. I'll do something to you. And dude's like, whenever you're feeling froggy, go ahead, jump, and all this shit. And I love this whole scene of those two arguing. I don't know why I liked it so much, but I was like, this is great, just how much shit they were talking to each other. And so, yeah, I really like that scene. And now, the guy can't really be tailing Max Cady anymore when the guy knows that, he's following him. So, the next day, the mom or the wife is like going outside to get the mail. As she's there, Deniro pulls up next to her, and he has the dog collar from the dog. And he's like, is this yours? I found it, He's like, you gotta be careful. Your dog running around without a collar. You never know what the animal control people will do to him. And so actually she's like, my dog just died a little bit ago. And somehow in the middle of this, she's able to realize who she's talking to. And she's like, wait a minute, you're fucking Max K. And she's like, why don't you get the fuck out of here, And Deniro, like, tries to say some bullshit about, like, I can tell you're not happy. And, trying to... He's trying to mess with people's minds this whole movie. He's trying to, like, convince them to, not join him, but trust him. And then eventually, Juliette Lewis comes outside and it's like, Mom, what's going on? And this is the first time that Deniro sees the daughter. And he, like, looks at it, and it plays, like, this music cue where it's like, and we zoom in and we see the daughter, and Deniro then just, like, and takes off down the road. So... the private investigator dude meets up with Nick Nolte, tells him that Deniro knows that, he's following him. And then he says, I could hire some people who could go and, give him a hard time, and he shouldn't be a problem after that. And Nick Nolte's like, no, we can't do that. That's crazy. Then that night, though, we go into Juliette Lewis's room, and she gets a phone call. And it's Robert De Niro on the phone. And he says that he is her new drama teacher. He's calling all his students or whatever. And he goes, why are you sounding so down, And she, says some shit. And basically, it's almost immediately that De Niro goes into this whole, like, don't suppress your sexual feelings, and like almost instantly. And she's like, and he's like, you can trust me. And she is like, immediately all in on all this. As he's talking to her, it cuts to his room, and this motherfucker's just hanging upside down. It's like, and he looks wild. He's got like this big smile. His hair is hanging down. His face is all red. And, yeah, I don't know what was going on with that, but I appreciated him just hanging upside down during this. So, he tells her, meet me in the theater tomorrow. That's what we're moving the classroom to the theater. What a better place to learn drama. So the next day, she goes to school, and it's time for her drama class, so she goes to the theater. And when she gets there, she realizes it's only her and Robert De Niro. And Robert De Niro's on stage, and he's smoking grass, as she puts it. Really going back to the 90s, He's smoking a joint. He offers her some, and she's like, oh, no, I shouldn't, And so he does the I think we're alone now, like, sings the song. I was like, okay. And so she, starts smoking too. And this, Tyler, I told Maverick when I picked this movie, there's a part of this movie that seemed to drag on forever, and I hated it. Because I remember when I first watched this, the whole movie I was in, and then they throw in one part that I was like, what are we doing? This is the scene. I hated this scene the first time I saw it. And the second time back, I don't like it any more than I did the first time. And I get what they're doing, because De Niro the whole time is just kind of, manipulating her and telling her everything she wants to hear. It reminds me of the I'm a liar, yeah, and like, you meet me and I tell you everything you ever want to hear, and I'm perfect in every single way and everything. And yeah, I don't know how you feel about it, but this scene has always bored me, and it's supposed to be real tense too, because we know this guy's like his history, and he's trying to manipulate her, and there's no music playing this whole time. The only thing that's happening is like her and De Niro talking by themselves in this room. And so it's supposed to be real tense and stuff, but I've never liked it. I've never liked this scene. I don't know why.
I thought it was kind of hot, but that was...
well, yeah.
I know.
I see too. All this apparently was ad-libbed by De Niro and Juliette Lewis, and apparently what we see is the first take. Like, they just made all this up. Apparently they did 3 takes, but the first one is the one they used. Which I kind of find it weird that a Martin Scorsese movie, he would just let them make up whatever they were going to say. But, they might have had, like, the general direction of it. And I'm sure De Niro can probably just carry a scene. Like, he can probably make up some shit when he's in his
Well, back then, he was a totally different person, right? Now
yeah.
He's like a weirdo, but...
Yeah. But yeah, so he is just, he's telling her all the shit he wants to hear about, it's her parents' fault that she got in trouble for smoking weed, and they shouldn't try to, punish her for their wrongdoings. In the middle of all this, I'm not really sure how, but in the middle of all this, she realizes that this is the guy that her parents have been warning her about. And so she's like, her first question when she realizes that, she's like, did you poison my dog? And he's like, no, I didn't poison your dog. And he's like, I'm not going to hurt you and all this shit. And then there's a part that I kind of think, because eventually Max Cady goes, I think I might have found my companion for that long walk to the light, right? Which is a very creepy thing to say. You basically just said, I found the person I'm going to, that's going to die with me. And then he goes, can I put my arm around you? And I was like, this is like not, and she's like, I guess. Like, she hides her face and shit. And so first off, then he comes over to her. He never puts his arm around her. Like, he comes over and he's like, my thumb. And twice he like and Juliette Lewis is clearly into it. She's like sucking on his thumb and shit. And then he kisses her, and then he kind of like stops and walks away, and then she like runs out of the place, and that's like the end of the scene. And then next we go over to Nick Nolte, and De Niro had given her the rest of that joint. So Nick Nolte found it in her bag and told him that, the Max Cady or whatever was there and gave it to me. Which I don't think she told him about. She clearly didn't tell him about all the other stuff.
Well, yeah, because later on he's like, "Did you touch him?"
Yeah. Because she says, she starts saying something like, he didn't force himself upon me. And she's like giggling. And so he's like, "Did he touch you?" And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "God damn it." He like flips out and grabs her face. And he's like, "Did he touch you?" And, but then he's like, "I'm sorry." And she like kicks him out or whatever. When Nick Nolte finds out that De Niro approached her at school, he immediately calls the private investigator. He's like, "I want you to hire those guys, Also, while he calls that guy, we see the private investigator. He does it a couple times throughout this movie, but he's drinking a combination of Jim Beam and Pepto-Bismol, which I was like, all right, I've never drank Jim Beam. I've drank Pepto-Bismol. I don't really know how they would mix, but who knows?
It was his daddy taught it to him.
Yeah. Nick Nolte the next day comes up to De Niro at a diner, and basically he's like, "You need to leave, or else you'll know hurt more than you've ever known, ever and shit." And De Niro's like, "Could you say that a little louder?" Basically, like, and Nick Nolte, dumbass, is still like, "I said," and he like speaks up, and De Niro's like, "Is that a threat?" And he's like, "You're goddamn right, it's a threat." And I was like, you're a fucking lawyer. Like, how do you not recognize all these signs? That night is when the daughter, we just talked about, has that whole scene with Nick Nolte and shit. The next day is when at night De Niro pulls up to his house and gets out, and he's going inside, and then the guy's like, "Hey, Max," and he turns around and just gets hit in the ribs with a baseball bat, and these three guys just start jumping De Niro. One of them has like a chain, it looks like, and like whips him in the chest and cuts him and shit, right? And for some reason, Nick Nolte decided that he had to be there to witness this. So he's hiding like behind a dumpster, smoking a cigarette, watching it. And it's going good. And then eventually Max Cady's like, "Ah!" And he just like... he hulks up. He does the whole ripping the shirt. And he just beats the shit out of these guys. And you can see Nick Nolte in the background like, no. Like, it's almost like a comedy bit how bad this is going, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. So De Niro beats up the last guy, and Nick Nolte like turns around and kicks over a bottle. And so De Niro's like, "Huh?" So he turns around, and I'm pretty sure that he knows Nick Nolte is behind that dumpster. But he just starts yelling a whole bunch of like Bible shit and Bible quotes. And he's like, "You hear, counselor? You see this, and all this shit." And he gets close to the dumpster, but eventually he's like, "Who gives a fuck if you're here? It's no different, and tosses the pipe. I farted. I muted my mic, but I'll tell the people at home that I farted.
Great. So
yeah.
we can fart along.
Yeah. The next day, Nick Nolte calls up this big-time lawyer, to basically be his lawyer at the hearing for the restraining order. But he's like, "Oh yeah, the guy I'm putting against Max Cady or whatever." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Max Cady actually acquired my services this morning, so I can't be talking to you." And he's like, "What? No, And so we go over to the hearing, and this is when that lawyer ends up being Gregory Peck, right? So he's here playing, the lawyer or whatever. And we see De Niro, and his hair is pulled back in like a ponytail, and he's wearing the suit, and he's just all fucked up. Like,
he's all jacked up.
Yeah. And they're like, and the first thing they're doing, they have the tape of the whole, if you don't get out of this town, And it's like, of course he was taping it, you idiot, Nick Nolte tries to like explain it, but the judge isn't hearing it, and the judge is like, I'm gonna give the restraining order, but it's for Max Cady. Max Cady is getting, so you're not allowed within 500 yards of Max Cady. Also, there's a weird part where he like quotes Booker T. Washington, but he says like in the quote, our famous Negro educator Booker T. Washington. I was like, what? Why do you? So, like, once again, this movie is based from the '60s, so but it's like '90s. We're still like, So Nick Nolte immediately goes to that private investigator dude and is like, I want a gun. I need a gun. And the guy's like, all right, well, let me see your hands. And Nick Nolte shows him his hands. And he's like, all right, I'll get you a 38 hog nose special, I think is what he said, right? But then immediately he's like, wait a minute, if you kill him, you could get
snub nose, not hog nose.
Okay. Where were you?
What?
Because I said that, and then it seemed like you ran all the way back. Snub nose.
No, I was leaning forward and fixed my chair.
Oh, okay. But yeah, he's like,
sorry.
Yeah, he's like, you'll get 10 years for, if you do this, or, you could decide you really can't kill him, and then all of a sudden he winds up with the gun and all this shit. And so basically he talks Nick Nolte out of it. Then they come up with this plan, though, where they can trick Deniro into thinking that Nick Nolte is going out of town and that he's leaving his wife and his daughter. And their plan is for the private investigator to stay over, and when Deniro breaks and enters or whatever, they can either, one, they could probably kill him for breaking and entering, or at the very least, they could pop one in his leg and arrest them for breaking and entering, and that's a whole thing. So the next day, they have Nick Nolte and his family drive to the airport and put on this whole show about him going out of town and shit. And De Niro's following him and sees this, so then he goes up to the desk and is like, "Hey, I got to get these papers to the lawyer dude. Could you tell me when he's going to be back?" And she's like, "Oh, we can't disclose that information." So De Niro starts going into a sob story about this accident, and they lost their daughter, and, they really need to get it or else they're not going to get the money or whether the compensation or whatever. And so she's like, "Oh, he's coming back the day after tomorrow." And so he's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." Back at home, obviously, though, it's all a ruse, and he's like walking in all crouched down and shit.
Did he like sneak out in the trunk or something? Like,
yeah.
It's real crazy.
Yeah, my whole thing with this, though, is they're supposed to be like, all right, we're home alone. But then they all just sit around doing nothing. Like none of them act normal when they're in the house. Like the daughter is just sitting in the living room in the dark doing nothing. And it was like, what? Like, act normal. Even though I do always like, I remember when we did The Conjuring, I told you that one of my favorite things about The Conjuring was like, even though all the shit was going on, that cozy feeling where you had like all these different people staying in the house together and they were all like sleeping in the living room. And I really liked that whole thing. I kind of had the same feeling here where like, you have it's like a big sleepover trying to get a murderer or something. Like, I don't know. It's just I like that for some reason when they put it in the movies. So yeah, they're home. There's a part where the daughter says, I don't remember what she said, but she's like kind of defending De Niro again, and she like walks away. And the private investigator dude is like, didn't he approach her? And the mom's like, you don't know about my daughter. If there's a palmetto bug in the room, she'll take it outside. She could never kill anything. And it was like, gee, well, I wonder who's probably gonna end up doing most of the, yeah. So they set up this wire trap with the daughter's teddy bear where these wires are attached to the doors. So if someone's trying to come in, it'll pull and you can see and all this shit, and the dude's staying in the living room. I talked about this in the Chucky TV show episode I did, where they're like one of the kids gets inspired by this movie and sets up a trap with the Chucky doll with the wires, so if another Chucky comes walking in, they can know they're coming in and shit. So Chucky pays homage to that in the show. So he set up this thing. Once again, the guy's drinking like Jim Beam and Pepto-Bismol. The maid is having to stay over because the maid stays over anytime the husband's out of town. For some reason, the wife is like, she's making me uncomfortable. It was like, why? It's like, isn't she always over?
Yeah, it's weird. She says that, and then they go, okay, we'll just keep staying. And
yeah.
And it's like, what? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Outside, there's like a big, it looks like one of those old aluminum can jars of like those cookies that aren't very good, but everyone had them, and then you turn it into a sewing kit. But it was like a giant one, and then the girl lifts it up, and underneath it there's a book about like sex and shit that Deniro clearly left for her.
So I read a lot of weird shit.
And
it's the trilogy that he was talking about earlier when they met in the school.
Okay.
And I've never read those books.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's like super erotic, right?
It's called Sex Us or something.
It's like Nexus, Sexus, and Finalis or something.
Yeah, it's probably like the OG 50 Shades of Grey. But
probably.
Yeah.
But like I've never read them, so I was like, it actually, I'm gonna go to Amazon and add them to my thing. But
all right. So she has this book now. Nick Nolte during the night starts having second thoughts. He's talking to the private investigator, and the dude's like, "No, this is good." He goes upstairs. He's like laying down with the wife now. Back in the living room, the bear starts to move, and so the private investigator's like, "Oh!" And he whips out the gun, and he goes over to the door, but it ends up like the door is a little loose or whatever, and it's windy. So he's like, "Oh, okay." So he fucking closes the door. He's like, false alarm. Back upstairs, this is when Nick Nolte wakes up, and like I said, he has the crazy flashes where like black and white, and Deniro's standing in the bedroom smoking a cigar, and he like rubs his eyes a couple times, and like twice he looks, and Deniro's still standing there, and then the third time he's gone, and he's like, "Oh, I was hallucinating or whatever. I thought Max Cady was standing in the in our bedroom," and she's like, "Oh, go back to sleep." Downstairs, the private investigator dude sits down at the table, and this is when he's pouring his Jim Beam and Pepto-Bismol, and the maid is behind him, and he's like, "Oh, staying up, had a false alarm a little bit ago," and she's like, "Oh, he says something else to her, and she kind of doesn't respond, and then the next thing you know, the maid turns around, and it's Robert De Niro dressed up in the
so crazy, right?
Yeah, and he pulls out like a garrote. And he just, like, whips it around the dude's neck. Instantly, it looks like, I'm pretty sure if you went frame by frame, the dude already had blood on his neck before he even put the thing. Like, he instantly starts bleeding.
Do you think that it was him the whole time? Like, even the first time? Like, you know how he walks in, he goes, "Oh, hey, Miss whatever."
Maybe.
And then he sits down to make his drink. Do you think
but I could have sworn that you got a good shot of her face when the lady was like, "I think he's making..." Oh, you're talking about when...
when he first enters that room, and then he sits down.
I don't know, because you hear him talk, and it sounds like... Like, I don't,
Oh, yeah, I'm curious if it's him the whole time, or if they just did, like, a cut-in.
Yeah. But he starts choking the guy, and the guy's taking the gun, and he's trying to, like, get it. But eventually he ends up just, like, shooting himself in the head. And so the private investigator dude's dead. Nick Nolte and them hear that from upstairs. So they're like shouting down the stairs, like, "Hey, you all right?" No one's answering. Eventually, I really like this. The mom goes over and like looks out the window. There's a lot of scenes of people like closing window blinds and looking out of windows in this movie.
They had 9,000 windows.
There's so much. She like looks out the window and you just see Robert De Niro just running across the yard. And yeah, I thought that was really funny. So she's like, "Oh, he's running," and so they go downstairs, and they find the private investigator dude dead and the maid dead. This is when I think the daughter finally is like, all right, well, this guy just killed these people, you know? And so she kind of, it opens her eyes a little bit to like, all right, this guy's dangerous. Then Nick Nolte like walks over to the dead private tent and just eats shit in his blood.
Yeah.
And he's like slipping. The wife comes over, she starts slipping. He gets the gun, he's like, I'm gonna kill this son of a bitch. He like goes outside and just starts fucking, he's like Frank Reynolds now. He's just like just shooting randomly. But they end up like pulling him back inside. So now they're getting the fuck out of town, and they're heading to Cape Fear. They have a boathouse, and they're going to stay on the boathouse. On their way out of town, Nick Nolte calls the lawyer dude and tells them that, you know, when they get to the house, they'll find, you know, the private investigator and the maid dead. And, you know, I know we're not supposed to flee the scene of a murder, but you got to understand, like, this guy, you know, and so he explains the situation. And then when he gets back in the car, it zooms down and we see that Deniro is hanging on underneath the car. And he's like tied his belt around the thing. And so he's coming with them. When they get to the boat and they get out and they get on the boat or whatever, Deniro waits a couple seconds and then he gets out. And when he gets out, he turns and there's just a black lady sitting there. And she's like staring at him, and he's like, you know, and they just don't say anything to each other, and she's like, it's none of my business, you know. So I thought that was good. De Niro goes in the bathroom, like cleans up his hair, and you know, gets all dressed and shit. The family is on the boat now. They throw over the anchor. They're having dinner. It starts fucking storming, because of course it does. It's the climax of the movie, so it's got to be raining. The boat is getting pushed around a lot, and so Nick Nolte's like, I'm going to go check on the anchor. So he goes out there, and he stares into the water, and it like zooms in, and you're like, does he see something? But then it cuts away, and the girls are back inside, and they like start calling for him, but he's not answering. And then eventually he's like, oh, sorry, it was windy. I couldn't hear you, you know? So he starts to come back inside, but before he can, he's grabbed from up on the roof. And one-handed, yeah. And it's Robert De Niro, and he drags him up there and fucking just chokes him out. And then he immediately goes over and cuts the anchor. So now the boat is flowing down the river.
Can we hold on a second? Okay. Nick Nolte's like 6'4".
Yeah.
220. And this dude just picked him up.
Yeah.
One arm.
Yeah.
Drug him all the way up with one arm.
Uh-huh.
Like, they start giving this guy, like, these mystical
Well, they
abilities.
do. They're coming, yeah, because we're coming to, he starts talking about, like, my mission is more than human and shit. Like, yeah.
And it's something.
Yeah. So then De Niro jumps in where the girls are and starts intimidating them, and he's talking to like the daughter, and he's like, you didn't bring you know your book or whatever. I was hoping we could have a conversation. She's like, I memorized some of it. And he's like, oh yeah, what part? And she's like, you know what part, you know? And so clearly you're like, all right, there must have been some fucking sex scene, you know, part. But then he says something else, and it like angers her enough to where she picks up this pot of boiling water and throws it into his face. And when it hits, you hear like the tss, like the and dude doesn't even flinch, and you're like, what the fuck? So then he pulls out a flare and lights it up and is holding it. And this is when he starts talking about, you know, my mission is more than flesh, and it's more than human and stuff. And it's like, dude, it's like melting all over his hand, and he's like not flinching at all. And you're like, this is crazy. And eventually he like throws it out. He also at one point in this talks about like, my granddad used to handle snakes in church or whatever. And I was like, what was that religion? Because I've always remembered like the religion where people every year, like these preachers get bit by the snakes and it like kills them and shit when it happens. But it was some wild, super religious.
Yeah, it's like a Pentecostal, whatever.
Yeah,
I've been to a couple of those. So they're wild, bruh.
Yeah. And then he makes Juliette Lewis like get in this little hole where they like keep like life jackets and shit down there. So he gets in there. She immediately starts looking around for something to grab. Meanwhile, De Niro is starting to rape the mom. He's like taking her clothes off and shit. Nick Nolte is outside in the rain, tied up, having to watch. He's not having a good day. The Juliette Lewis in the thing ends up finding lighter fluid, and she like puts it down into her pants. That was like the only thing she could find that was useful, I guess, in here, right? So the wife starts to reach down to grab the gun out from behind the dude's pants, but De Niro realizes what he's doing, so he like stands up, goes out, gets the husband, drags him in, and just starts fucking stomping on him, and and the wife's like, no, leave him alone. He goes in, he pulls out Juliette Lewis. He's telling the guy like, I'm gonna rape your daughters in front of you or some shit. Then the mom starts telling De Niro that she understands, about losing time and losing years, and they have a connection, so whatever he's gonna do, just do it to her, not the daughter and all this shit. And like it looks like it gets through to De Niro a little bit, like he's sitting there listening to her. And so he's like, oh, you're brave for that, and so he's like, he's still talking to her. And then this is when the whole movie, like I said, he keeps talking about, his only vice is the cigar. He once again pulls out the cigar, starts to light it, and Juliette Lewis pulls out the lighter fluid from her pants and squirts him, and you get the fakest looking fire comes up on Robert De Niro, and he's like, ah! And finally he like starts yelling, and he runs off the boat and jumps into the water to put out the fire. This is when I do say I call bullshit on the fact that this guy jumped off and then is able to catch up to the boat. And I mean, you see how like rapid the waters are.
It's a pretty cool scene where the hand shoots up, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's like, come on.
Yeah, but he manages to like get back to the boat before the family can manage to do a whole lot. He comes back up, and now he's just all burnt up. Like he's just looking even more crazy than he was. He gets everyone down on their knees. He gets Nick Nolte down on his knees and starts doing a whole trial with them and shit. And he's like hitting them in the face, and then he'll turn around to the camera and he'll be like, I know, Your Honor, but he was arguing with me. And he'll like turn back, like just batshit crazy at this point. And I was like, this is wild. And this is when he drops the thing. He's like, was there not evidence that showed she was promiscuous and that she was with 3 different, people in a month. And he's like, yeah, and he's like, why didn't you bring it to the defense? And the guy's like, because I knew you raped that girl and you would do it again and shit. And De Niro's like, you were my lawyer. He's like, you were, you're supposed to upstand, and just like, you betrayed me and you betrayed justice. And, he's all about this justice. And he's fucking losing it. He's just yelling and spitting and shit all over the place. He eventually starts to make the girls like get down on their knees and strip when a big wave hits them and everyone falls over. So Nick Nolte is able to get the girls and toss them over the side of the boat. So they're out of the picture. Nick Nolte and Robert De Niro start fighting. And eventually they lose each other, and De Niro, as he's looking for Nick Nolte is able to sneak up behind him and use the handcuffs that De Niro was going to handcuff Nick Nolte to like the rail in the boat. He's able to handcuff De Niro's ankle to the rail right as the boat starts hitting rocks and falling apart and sinking and shit. So Nick Nolte jumps over the side, and then there's a real weird transition where he like jumps in, and then it looks like it immediately just shoots him out onto like the shoreline.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was real weird looking. But shoots him up, and De Niro also washes up on like the little piece of wood with the rail that he's still attached on. So Nick Nolte gets a rock and just starts hitting him, and De Niro is like, "Oh, this is against this is against that restraining order. You're well within 500 yards counts. Like, just talking shit to him. He's like, we're two lawyers just talking it out, like, you know, like you said earlier. At one point, he manages to get a shot in with himself. I don't know how he managed to get the rock away from him and hit him.
That was the best part, is he punches him, and he falls back, and then dude, like, chucks the rock at him.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so good.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, fuck that guy.
So then Deniro falls over. Nick Nolte grabs a big-ass rock, and he's going over for the kill shot. He's going to bring it down on his head. But as he's doing it, the water comes and grabs the boat or the piece of wood and drags him away into the middle of the river. Dude now is just like yelling gibberish. Which I read a thing when I was reading through this movie. They talked about, you know, it sounds like he's speaking gibberish, but he's actually speaking in tongues. And I was like, fuck out of here. Speaking in tongues is the same thing as gibberish. Like, it's nothing, you know? He's so overjoyed because he thinks he's going to the kingdom of heaven and all this shit. But it's just like he's just saying nothing. And then eventually he starts, like, singing to himself. And he sinks down. And then finally we get one of the coolest shots in all of these movies that we've watched, which is just Robert De Niro. His whole, like, nose and water and mouth is under the water, and it's just his eyes, and he's just death staring. The dude from, like, half of his face is submerged in water, and they just stare at each other. And you don't see him, like, struggling to breathe. He's just staring. It's crazy. And then finally, the last little bit of water comes up, and he gets sucked down into the water. And Nick Nolte goes over and is, like, washing the blood off of his hands. You half expect, like, a Jason, like, and, like, him to come out. But no, he's dead. Nick Nolte meets up with the girls on the shore that they've washed up on, and they hug. We get, once again, that last weird narration from Juliette Lewis I said I hated, where she's like, we don't talk about him anymore. I'm all about living now and trying to live. The end. And I was like, all right, well, that was fucking weak.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then randomly in the credits, like I said, I saw Edgar Allan Poe IV was a prisoner in this movie. But that's the end of Cape Fear. So
no questions.
Okay.
No questions. I probably should have brought this one up earlier. Did he kill the maid?
Yeah. You see her dead body.
When do you see her dead body?
When they go down in the kitchen, you see both of them. They're both dead.
Oh, I didn't. I just, because later on she's like, we should call her brother, and I was like,
yeah, no, she has the same, like, neckline across her throat. Yeah, she was dead as hell.
Who's the bad guy of this movie?
That's the thing, because when I watched this movie the first time, I remember I was rooting for De Niro for a lot of it. But at the same time, you know, it's very gray, because Nick Nolte seems like a piece of shit, kind of. Like, he's cheating on his wife. Like I mentioned, he has the thing where, like, the lady gets raped, and he's like, oh, that's good news, because now it's a problem he doesn't have to deal with because someone else, you know. But at the same time, you know, and who knows if he's telling the truth, but he says that he buried the evidence he got about that girl because he believed that De Niro raped and beat that girl and that he was going to do it again. So, in his mind, he was doing what he thought was right. He was taking, you know, this criminal. He wasn't going to defend someone who he believed actually was, like, you know, a threat to these girls. Now, you know, there's a whole thing with De Niro talking about, you know, you were my lawyer, you were supposed to, you know, and all this shit. And, you know, I don't think there's any question in my mind that De Niro did rape and beat that girl, especially with what we've seen throughout the movie. But you can make the argument that maybe De Niro went into this space of mind when he went to prison. Like, prison just broke him and then built him up into this new monster. But yeah, I don't know. If I had to, I would say that Nick Nolte, probably, for as scummy as he seems, is the good guy. because I found myself not rooting for De Niro as much as I remember doing, especially near the end when he gets real rapey. And I mean, not even the end. I mean, halfway through, he's biting that bitch's cheek out, and like, you know. So
now I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
okay.
Not even devil's advocate because it's kind of how I feel, but
Check out the Devil's Advocate podcast episode we did a couple months ago.
But anyways, like, say you're a normal guy, you plowed some chick you met at the bowling alley,
Yeah.
and they say, you're just sitting there minding your own, don't even know how to read,
Yeah.
and then cops come busting in, and
Yeah.
your only hope is this lawyer,
Yeah.
and for some reason the lawyer has been decided that you raped these other two ladies, so this one has to be you too.
Yeah.
And the one piece of evidence that can get you off, he buries.
Yeah.
So then the next 14 years, all you do is you stew and stew to get revenge. I think this movie could be from either side, right?
Yeah. Well, my one problem with that is the fact that you said, I might have raped these other two girls. I'm like, well, I don't care if you didn't rape the third one.
You don't know if he did.
Yeah.
He says, I'm pretty sure you raped them too. And it's like,
yeah.
You're assuming all this thing. I mean, the guy has a tattoo on his heart that says Loretta, which they never talk about.
They never know. He says that was the love of my life. There's no longer,
She's dead or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Like, it'd be different if Robert De Niro came out and, like, right when he got out, he just, like, killed his daughter.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, this movie obviously reminds me a lot of, now that we're talking about it, is Law Abiding Citizen.
Yep.
Which is another movie I think is incredible. I think fucking Homeboy is great in it. Goddamn. What's the name? Unhinged. Gerard Butler? No. That's the other guy. Where's the Gerard Butler?
It is Gerard Butler.
Okay. But that is a lot of the same. It's not the same, this guy is a guy who had his family, I think, killed. Like, and then they did the plea. Invasion. They did the plea deal because they didn't think they had enough evidence to get, like, what they really wanted. So they did the plea, so at least, like, the guy would get a punishment out of it. And the dude was like, no, that's not justice, In that movie, I think all the way through, Gerard Butler was the good guy. Because I don't remember him ever, like, he sends the tape to Jamie Foxx's house, and obviously, like, the daughter ends up watching it of him, like, killing that guy or whatever. But I was never, like,
he even apologizes.
Yeah, like, he didn't, that movie, throughout that whole movie, I was like, Gerard Butler's the good guy. Like, everyone, he's...
Well, except for the judge.
Yeah, but wasn't there a thing where the judge was kind of like,
But you can't kill people just because you don't like them.
Tell that to fucking, I don't know. I'm trying to think of someone who killed people because tell that to the Navy SEAL Team 6.
Well, they're killing terrorists. But anyways.
There was one specific.
Tell that to Alec Baldwin.
Wow.
But
disrespectful.
But anyways, like I was saying, like, if he came out and started raping and killing his family members or something, you would completely be understand. At this point, we don't know if he killed the dog. We're assuming he did.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good assumption.
It's a pretty good assumption.
Got jumped by 3 dudes in a parking lot.
He did. They beat the shit out of him.
Yeah. He got harassed by the police and stripped down and everything else. Like, De Niro really didn't do much wrong until he started killing maids and PIs. But the PI was already out to kill him, so,
Yeah. Like I said, I think I was with De Niro until, like, after he bites that chick's cheek out, you're kind of like, all right, well, this guy's got some stuff going on. But, it's,
But he, didn't kill her or nothing. So, like...
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like he makes a point in the car. He's like, how do you pay back 14 years of your life gone? Never got to meet his daughter, wife, or ex-wife, or baby mama told him that he was dead.
Hmm.
So he's lost his family. He's lost 14 years. He's lost all of these things.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was with Deniro the whole movie, man. I was like, yeah. Plus, he was one step ahead like every time,
Yeah.
and it's all shit that if you just framed it a little differently, you could have had a different main character. Even though I feel like De Niro was the main character, you just didn't get to follow him the whole time.
Yeah. Um,
I,
I swear there's a part where he's not even in the movie for like 30, 40 minutes or something. It seemed like there was a part where he was like gone for a while. But, you know. Movie had a budget of $35 million. Made a box office of $182 million. So, shout out to that. I read originally this was supposed to be a Steven Spielberg movie, but Spielberg read it and called Scorsese and said that, hey, this is probably a guaranteed, like, kind of box office success, and it will help you do more movies down the line that you want to get made, you know? So Spielberg apparently called and got Scorsese to do this job. Scorsese apparently, what I read the script like 3 times and was like, this is fucking terrible. And apparently the original script, the family was supposed to be like a normal, happy family. He was like, I want them to be miserable. So he's the one that added the whole like the daughter type of things with her and the cheating and the wife is miserable and yeah, so that was Scorsese that did that. Let's do best of worst of.
yeah, I don't think we've done a best of worst of in our like last 3 podcasts.
We did one for what was the last episode we did?
Jigsaw?
Oh man, did we not do one for the marrow?
I don't think we did.
We didn't do one for the marrow, no. All right, well let's do one for the marrow. My worst of was when they took off that pumpkin sack, and it was that shitty looking spider dude or whatever. Best of was probably the scare with him being like, I got my boot, and the dude's like, what the fuck are you doing out here? That scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, when the detective.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. So what was your
whatever
best of worst of for the marrow?
I think the best stuff has to be that monster thing when it's a jump scare.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's
Yeah.
right there. And
Right
he
in
turns
front of
around.
us. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
That was really good. The worst part of that movie is everything, all the convention footage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I didn't need any of it.
Yeah.
Like, I understand in the later part because it like links the guy.
Uh-huh.
So like that makes sense. But like the first 15 minutes,
Yeah.
it felt like that whole movie with that stuff was a plug for their real movies.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I was just like, no, we don't need this.
All right,
Anyway.
well, hey, took care of that. So now for this one, best of, worst of, my best of, like I said, I think I'm going to stick with the scene with De Niro and the private investigator just, like, trading barbs back and forth outside of that diner. Like, I don't know, I really liked it, though. Is that a fucking threat? And he's like, you're goddamn right, it's a threat. And, like, it was really good.
The really crazy part about that is
Uh-huh.
that, well, people watching this stuff don't know me. You know me.
I do.
I fuck with people, and this is exactly how I fuck with people. I
Yeah,
will
yeah.
say things to get a response,
Uh-huh.
and I'll say whatever it takes.
Yeah.
I'm an asshole. Like, I don't know, but I'll be like, even when we used to get yelled at work, I'd still bring up shit and just get yelled at more because I'm like, I'm going to push these buttons to get a reaction,
Yeah.
and let's see what happens.
Uh-huh.
And to me, that was just like a chess match, right? Or a tennis match, you know?
Yeah,
They kept
yeah.
like pushing.
Yeah.
And I don't know who won, but it was still pretty good.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have that control of my emotions where I probably would have lost that one.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing they said offended me, but
Yeah,
but I would be like, you know what? And then, you know,
yeah. My worst of, like I said, I'm probably gonna go with what I came into this thinking my worst of was gonna be, and once again, is the whole theater scene with them talking. I don't know what it is about that scene. I haven't liked it since the first day I saw it. I didn't like it this time. I think it's just kind of a drag. I remember looking at my phone, being like, "All right, when's this scene fucking over?" Um, yeah, I don't know. I've never liked that scene. I'm sure that like to other people, that's probably their favorite scene of the movie, but I've never liked it. I don't know what it is. So.
It's a good scene because it shows Deniro being like a master
Yeah,
manipulator.
yeah, and like I understand it, but for some reason it hasn't clicked with me either. The times I've seen it, I've never liked that scene. Um, so what's your best of worst of for this one?
I'm trying to think. Um, I don't know how to like generalize my best of. So I do have my favorite part,
Uh huh.
and my favorite part of this movie is when Nick Nolte eats shit in the blood.
That's pretty good.
Because he goes, oh my god, oh my, and he grabs a gun. He's like, I'm gonna, and then he just
Yeah.
fucking, and he's covered in blood. The wife's trying to get him up.
Uh
He's
huh.
slipping and sliding around, and it was really great.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can say what my worst is,
Hmm.
but and okay, this wasn't a thing back in the days, right? But I don't know if it was Homegirl trying to be this way or whatever. But whatever her name is from Natural Born Killers, Juliet Lewis,
Yeah. Yeah.
seems like she's autistic, or maybe a little touched in the head. I don't know how to phrase that
She's a
better. I mean,
very. She's a
she
very.
seems smart, but not
I
like
don't think she was smart at all.
there was stuff like parts in there where she was like, and I'm like, what? I was like, fine, what? Yeah, hit her with the pipe next, please.
Yeah, I don't know. She has a very
And
strange face. I've always found too with that
it,
lady.
yeah, I would say any scenes with her in it,
Mm-hmm.
which is bad because like at the end she seems like the only person fighting back, and I think they foreshadow that
Yeah, like with the
the
she wouldn't.
boxing.
She couldn't hurt a
Well,
fly
no,
or.
remember in the very beginning, you're like, you're in boxing, just punch him, kick him in the
Oh,
face or
yeah,
whatever, and the whole time they're like, no.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't like you said. I've seen this movie a couple times, and after the after like
you
seeing
know what I
it,
was doing.
yeah, after like seeing it a couple times and all like the twists and everything,
Uh huh.
it's just a slog to get through.
Yeah, it definitely felt a lot slower the second time around than the first time.
It's like you're going through the movie, and I was sitting here, and I've been kind of quiet this whole cast because it's like there's really not much to talk about. You could probably write this whole movie in like two paragraphs.
Yeah.
Lawyer lets down client, client gets out, wants revenge, does nothing for an hour except for kind of pesters them, and then they fight on a boat. Like,
Yeah.
I just feel like after the first couple times watching it loses all the suspense.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure back in like the 90s when this came out, it wasn't like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's some stuff in there, and they're like, oh, this is depraved. We bites that lady's cheek or whatever.
Yeah.
But like they didn't have the Human Centipede, they didn't have the Saw movies, they didn't have like the really messed up shit we have now.
Uh huh.
To where like I don't think De Niro seemed that bad.
But they had Society.
Yeah, if De Niro at the end was like the shunting,
Yeah.
then maybe
He was like.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're such a different culture now to where it's like I think the whole she was promiscuous.
That was the one that really aged to me, yeah.
Yeah,
She
aged
was
real
with
bad.
3 different people in a month. It was like, okay. It's like,
But
that seems
like,
pretty good.
I think the theater scene's supposed to be like he got her high and then took advantage of her.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, guys, so like weed's such a commonplace thing now
Yeah.
that like it's like it doesn't do that. Like,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. There's a lot of back
Like
when
I
this
said,
movie came out.
I really want to check out the 60s version because it feels like there's a lot of this stuff in this movie they didn't change from the 60s version. Like, it feels like the whole weed and the ooh, she's with 3 different people. Like that I can really imagine being a big thing in 61 when the original came out, is she's with 3 different men in a month. Oh my goodness, you know? But but that being said, I have no intention of watching the movie anytime soon, but I'd like to check it out someday.
It's a whole, I don't know. And they left a lot of answers like off the board. Like you never know if he did it.
Yeah.
Because to me, if he did it, then that makes him the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
So if he would have revealed at the end, he was like, "When I was raping and beating this woman,"
Uh-huh.
then I would have been like, "Well, fucking Nolte was right to do what he did, right? Because the ends justify the means."
Yeah.
But the fact they don't answer that, it just leaves it up in the air. So it's like, I don't know. It's like I said, it's a good movie to watch once because, believe it or not,
it's worth the first watch through.
yeah, a lot of movies draw on it. There's a lot of
Yeah. I mean,
homage.
I talked about one in this with the Chucky
Yeah.
series. Yeah.
And that whole thing with his eyes in the water and stuff.
Mhm.
There's a lot of shit that comes from this movie.
Yeah.
My favorite movie of all time, Cool Hand Luke, is the same way.
Mhm.
Like even I love it, but if you don't like it, you're gonna watch it and be like, I know half this movie because
Yeah.
so much shit copies it.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't know. And fucking Robert De Niro bangs in this movie.
He
He
does.
is. I don't know. I This is gonna sound weird because Robert De Niro's in the other one. I feel like this is Robert De Niro's Joker.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
that was Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it showed that they could play this totally unhinged, crazy, still believable
Yeah. It's
character.
weird. Yeah, it's weird seeing De Niro kind of playing like a role, if you know what I mean? Like cuz he was the gangster dude forever, and I get like Taxi Driver. I think a lot of people probably say the Taxi Driver is his Joker because a lot of people compare Joker to Taxi, or it's just Taxi Driver or Taxi, because Taxi,
Actually, yeah.
because
Taxi's that show in the
with
'70s with
with the
Joker.
Vito, and then
Yeah,
um, but yeah, but nowadays he went into the gangster role, and then nowadays he's kind of just plays what I think people think Robert De Niro is, like he's just the old man New York like filthy mouth dude. And so it's kind of like Christopher Walken. Over time, it seems like Christopher Walken has got paid to just come in and play what people think Christopher Walken is in a movie. Like he doesn't play roles anymore. He's just like, oh,
yeah.
Christopher
It's just
Walken.
he just plays him. Oh
Uh,
god, he just plays himself.
yeah, yeah. So it's weird going back and watch because this is a straight up. This is very different than other De Niro movies. Um, yeah.
I'm always there's certain like Pacino and De
This,
Niro and them.
yeah,
It's like a lot of times when you see him in their current stuff, you're like, I don't know why people like him so much.
yeah.
But he's so good in this that even with that horrible Southern accent, he's really decent.
This character weirdly reminds me of like in Jackie Brown. It seems like he's playing a more toned down version of the same guy.
Like a mature, older
Yeah,
version.
yeah. Like
Like,
if the
don't say
guy
the
just
name.
stayed in prison
Don't say
longer
the
and
name.
got
Yeah.
out. Yeah, yeah. I'm telling you, just don't say. All right, sorry.
So it's I don't know. And then this guy has a bunch of like Russian literature and stuff on his walls that
Yeah,
depicts like
yeah.
Stalin and Putin and stuff. And I'm like, it's just anti-Russian. I mean, right now that's big,
Uh
right?
huh.
But I'm like, a lot of these philosophers and stuff are from that
Yeah, this is
region.
like, aren't we getting right out of the Cold War? When was the Cold? This is 91. When's the Cold War? The Cold War's a little earlier. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
82 or something.
yeah. Babe, pigs, and all that stuff.
Yeah, fucking. At this
I
point,
think
I
it's
think we're.
84,
Yeah, at this point,
but
I think we're in the Gulf War already. I think the Gulf War started like 88.
yeah, there's still a lot of anti-Russian hate,
Yeah,
so they had to show the Russia stuff to be like, this is the guy you don't
yeah, he's
like.
a fucking commie. Um, yeah. Anyway,
But I'm not gonna lie, this movie's 2.5 hours long.
I think it's only 2.8, but it feels 2.5.
Oh, I always get confused because it'll say like 2:04, and I don't know if that's 2 hours and 4 minutes
Uh huh.
or if it's 204 minutes.
Yeah.
But it goes on, man. There's so much Nick Nolte. Like it's like we don't need
Yeah, a lot of Nick Nolte, and not the cool drunk Nick Nolte.
a lot of times they have conversations, and you're like, why do I need to hear half of this stuff?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But like I said, it's a good movie. I say this a lot. In no way a horror movie. And after you've
Yeah.
seen it the first time, without the suspense, it's not even like a
Yeah, like I
suspense
said, it
thriller.
was way more horror-y the first time. The second time I was like, ah.
It just seemed like a tame John Wick to me. But
Oh yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks for listening to us talk about Cape Fear. Next week, seeing as how I don't know what's going on with Maverick, and there's a good possibility it's still gonna be me and Tyler here. I was thinking, Tyler, that we would watch a movie that Papa Hades recommended to us a while ago that I had on the list. I hadn't picked yet, but I figured this was a perfect opportunity because not only is it, I believe, a found footage movie. Me and you were big suckers for found footage. But it also has to do with
like a
something.
guilty pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It also has to do with something that we've only covered once on the podcast, and it's a very
UFOs.
notorious movie that we talked about before. So next week, Tyler, I figured we'd watch a movie from 2014 called Exists that is about Bigfoot. So,
Well, you know how much I love Bigfoot and Yetis and
yeah.
Sasquatches.
If I remember correctly, I don't remember which episode it was that Papa Hayes commented this on, but he was like, I know you guys didn't like Willow Creek. But he was
How dare you, Papa?
but he was like, check out this movie called Exists. It's about Bigfoot. So I figured me and you would jump in. Also, I look at it.
Have you seen anything on this movie?
No, I have no idea. No, I just looked it up to make sure
Uh,
I was getting the name right and the year. And I see, Tyler, that it's a cool hour and 26 minutes. And that sounds
that's not bad.
perfect to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, next week I figured we jump into Papa Hades' recommended Exists about
The only thing I
Bigfoot.
can think of is we could do that, or we could do AX7 or whatever it is. But I don't know when it'll be out. You know, I'm talking about that A24 film.
Oh, X?
Yeah,
Yeah.
X.
Yeah. I don't know when that'll come out.
So we'll do Exist, I guess, and then
Yeah.
go from there.
So, yeah.
I love fucking Bigfoot movies.
Yeah. So that'll.
We played the game, remember?
We didn't.
Yeah, we did.
No.
I swear, I played that game with you.
You didn't. Because I kept wanting to play the Bigfoot game, but you and Maverick wouldn't get it with me.
I have it. What's it called?
I don't know.
It's not the Forest.
No.
I have it. We played it. I know we did.
We never played
And the fucking Bigfoot just kept running from us, and we were chasing him down, shooting.
No, Tyler, that was the fucking. That was that one game where we were chasing around the monster and it kept running from us. And then after you killed it, there was the tree monster and shit, remember?
That's a different game. That was a game where you got jacked up by that dude
Yeah.
who you shot at a tree, and you're like, oh man, I don't know what's going on. Hey, what's up? Ah!
Yeah. But there,
No,
the first monster in it was like a werewolf type thing.
the game I'm talking about, we played, because I remember I was in the van, and y'all are out running around, and I had cameras and lights and stuff. We played the game.
That
I'm
ghost
looking.
game.
No, that's a different. That's Phasmophobia.
You might have played, but we never played that Bigfoot game because I don't own a Bigfoot game.
I'm looking right now to
Alright.
tell you that you played it.
Alright.
I can't find anything. In my,
Yeah.
I'm looking, I just don't know what it's called, and I have a lot of games.
All right. Well, while you're looking for that, I'll do the little outro thing here. So next week exists. Me and Tyler will probably be here for that. After this comes out Monday, there's probably going to be an overtime. I'll see if Tyler wants to be in it. Well, I guess I'll ask you now because we'll probably film it tomorrow if you want to be in it. But if you don't, I'm probably going to do an overtime for the Lost Boys because I just watched that. So I don't know if you feel like watching it tomorrow and us doing a podcast when I get home from work about the Lost Boys in overtime. But
Which one's the Lost Boys?
the vampire one with Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah. But I watched that, and that seems to be a popular movie, so I'll do an overtime for that. Like I said, Tyler might be there for it. See about that tomorrow. Other than that, we got some shorts. I know for a fact that some shorts came out this week when the podcast came out. We got some shorts from, what was the episode I did? I believe maybe Haunt was the episode I did. That one with the fucking, the weird people where they take off the mask and they were all deformed underneath. And it was like the haunted house that they were really killing people. I think that's where I got some clips. No, I'm sorry. It's Jezebel. That was the episode that very risque clips I pulled from it too, I gotta say. Where
I think I even mentioned that when you did it, and you were like, "They're fine."
Yeah, where we make some jokes. Also, there's one clip from the last week's episode of what did we watch? Oh, the Marrow, about us talking about a mugshot that'll be out by now too. So go check those out. There might be some shorts next week. I don't know. I'll have to sit through them. Link to the gaming channel in the description. A bunch of shorts are going to come out for that. I don't know if a new Golf It video will be out. We haven't played in a while. We need to, but Maverick's PC took a shit, like I said. Other than that, I was telling Tyler about, anyone know the show The Lost Tapes from like 2008? That was on Sci-Fi. That was like these found footage. Every episode was new, and I thought they were real as fuck, and it scared me as a kid. Found them. They're on YouTube for free. Someone uploaded every season. Watched the first episode the other day about the Chupacabra, and it was a piece of shit, and I was really sad. But I might still go through them. So maybe I'll do a Lost Tapes episode one day. We'll talk about the Lost Tapes. But
I swear we played that game.
We never played it. No, because Papa Hades went over to the gaming channel and said we should play it, and I commented to him. I was like, I kept telling them I want to play, and they never wanted to play that game. But
account details. Let me see. I know we played it. I know. We must have refunded it or something. I'm looking. I'm going to look through your profile, see if you have the game, because I know you never get credit for anything.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, like I said, that's the lineup of what's coming out exists next week, and also the overtime for Lost Boys. And yeah, so that's what's coming out. I don't know. Maybe after next week, maybe Maverick's PC. He has to buy a whole new motherboard and shit, so who knows when he'll be back.
I just looked them up, and they're all in stock.
Yeah, so. But he said they were out.
Maybe the one he was looking for.
Yeah.
That game you're talking about is Witch Hunt, by the way.
Witch Hunt, yeah.
You got a bunch of weird games in here, man.
Yeah. But anyway.
Anyways.
Thanks for watching. Guys. See you next week. Finger guns again. All right.